Ryan. I'm chair of the National Storytelling Network Stories and Organization, SIG. And I am really delighted to be here on this February day. Hi, okay. And today we have the Reverend Tawana Davis, who's part of Soul to Soul. She is the co-founder, and we will be hosted today by Ateen Anita George. But before I start, I have to do a shout out that all roads lead to Queens, New York. Now, some of you know that I wrote a book about Learned It in Queens Communication Playbook, but when I was perusing Reverend Davis's LinkedIn profile, as I do before any of these sessions, I realized she went to St. John's University, which was next door to where I grew up, literally a block over. And she and I have bonded over many things, especially the fact that she had to endure the Queens and the Bronx bus system and subways. So on that further note, you're going to hand it over to you, my dear, and then we'll take it from here.
Thank you so very much, Jules. And I am deeply honored and very pleased to introduce the Reverend Tawana Davis. Tawana is the daughter of the late Rosa Lide Davis, the granddaughter of the late Dorothy L. Whitfield and Alice Mack, the great-granddaughter of the late Katie Sarah Anderson and Rosa Lide Mack, prominent matriarchs who shared stories of resilience from young motherhood to escaping domestic violence. And Tawana has lived to share the story. She was born and raised in Harlem. She matriculated from the New York City public school system, earned a Bachelor of Science and 2 Masters of Arts, and is currently a PhD candidate at the Graduate School of Leadership and Change of Antioch University. Tawana is a co-founder of Soul to Soul Sisters and Surviving Breast Cancer. She has 2 brilliant children who have chosen to be educators and 1 incredible grandson. And without further ado, please help me to welcome my friend and my sister, Reverend Tawana Davis. And Tawana, I am going to shift over so that you can share your slides. Give me just a moment. Coming. And we have so many folks here. We've got a new host right this moment.
Awesome. All right. Well, what an honor and a privilege to be here in community today, sharing the stories Black women tell, a stream of culture. Thank you to this amazing storytelling organization and stressing the importance of storytelling, whether it is in our homes, in our communities, in our workplace. Storytelling definitely propels us into community. It invites community, it secures community, it shares in stories and getting to know one another. And that is the key to relationships. So I thank you for this opportunity. What a pleasure, what a privilege, what an honor. And let's get started and journey together. I will open with a poem by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me? Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, born non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me every day. For every day, something has tried to kill me and has failed. Again, I am Tawana Davis. I am the daughter of the late Rosa Lide Davis. I am the granddaughter of Dorothy Laverne Whitfield Davis and Alice Mack. I am the great-granddaughter of Katie Sarah Anderson and Rosa Lide Mack. Prominent patriarchs sharing their stories that often go untold. in the public sphere. Stories that we don't necessarily see in the media, various forms of media until recently. Stories that were told in silence, or even stories that were not told due to shame. Janet Dewart Bell says Black women have been silenced, dehumanized, hypersexualized. Black women didn't stand on ceremony. They simply did the work that needed to be done. Yet despite their significant contributions at the levels of the movement, they remain mostly invisible to the larger public. Some stories are told or not with the utmost secrecy due to shame, privacy, guilt, hurt. So as we journey together, I invite you, as I name these women, as I present the stories women tell, a stream of culture. I am Tawana, no middle name Davis. And because my sister is on the line and she has a middle name, I'm having some issues with that because my mother's name is Rosa Lide. My dad is Edward Eugene. Everybody else has a middle name except me. Okay, I digress. Anya Kathleen, I love you. I love you. But I'm hating right now because I don't have a middle name. And I was actually teased about it often. You don't have a middle name? What's okay? All right. I was born and raised in Wagner Projects, 42 buildings. Most buildings had 16 floors and it had 8 apartments on each floor. And in these 8 apartments, there were at least 2 to 3 bedrooms in each apartment. So 16 floors, 8 apartments on each floor with 2 to 3 bedrooms in each apartment. I was born in 1970, years after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and our beloved Malcolm X. I was born during a time right before hip hop was born in the Bronx, right across the bridge. When we talk about bridges, there was a bridge that led straight to Queens from Wagner Projects, and there was a bridge that I can walk across to go to the Bronx. I was born during a time where 10 to 12 years later, the crack epidemic hit. I lost some friends and family to either drug addiction, mass incarceration, or even gun violence. Yet, there was something about the stories that my mom and my aunties and my grandmother told me, the small gestures of love that reminded me that I was more than what society was telling me. For society was telling me I was too dark. Society was telling me that my hair wasn't straight enough. My society was telling me that I wasn't smart enough. Society was telling me that I was dehumanized and I was barely even a person. But the stories of my parents and my grandparents told me something different. I was an honors student most of my educational life. Listen, I skipped the first grade, y'all. That's some big time stuff, from kindergarten to second grade. That's big. I had my daughter at age 16. I graduated from high school the next year. I attended St. John's University at the age of 17, took 3 trains and a bus, and walked up a long hill for 4 straight years. And as Jules talked about, that was no easy 2-hour commute, rain, snow, sleet, shine. Like a male person, I was taking 3 trains and a bus and walked up a hill. Like our parents used to tell stories about how they had to walk 3 miles to school in the snow with, you know, barely any decent shoes on. Well, this is a real story as well, trekking to St. John's University. But what was so special about St. John's University is not only its academic prowess, but the beauty of attending St. John's was the Black Student Union, where I really learned about myself and my culture. In the Black Student Union, I learned about Black authors and Black history and Black resilience and Black women who often went unnoticed, uncalled, silenced. They were in this proverbial invisible institution. Unfortunately, I had to leave St. John's before completing my last year of study when my mom was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, cancer of the bone marrow, in 1991. I left St. John's and became her caregiver. And in 1993, she succumbed to challenges and died from multiple myeloma. So I was a mother of a 6-year-old and caring for my younger brother and sister, because my mother was a foster parent for 15 years. And out of all the children that she had cared for, she adopted 2 children, and I became their caregiver once she died. I was in a space where I lost my mom, my griot, my matriarch, my best friend. I hated life. I hated the color of my skin. I hated growing up in the projects. I didn't even know that I was living in an impoverished situation until I knew. I began to reflect on stories, though, that Black women tell. The story of my grandmother who had the resilience to escape domestic violence at the hands of her husband and move to New York. The whispers of my mom telling me that I am smart and I am beautiful. The loving actions of my aunt that used to come to the house during family gatherings and say, "Let TT kiss the bushes," since we all had these bushy ponytails like 2 pom-poms on our heads. I continued to reflect on the griots, the keepers of the family lineage, and information, the storytellers, the leaders, the mystics, the teachers, the activists, the historians, the authors, the matriarchs. I continue to remember the voices of my parents telling me that I am more than enough. I remember the resilience of my parents and my grandparents, where my mom and my grandmother were nurses and my dad was the first Black man to become a director in his particular department. And he was a Mason, and he was in the community and speaking Black love and Black life to a generation that seemed to have no hope. Going back and fetching it, I continue to reflect on the griots, the keeper of the family lineage and information. And now we see authors like Brittany C. Cooper and Patricia Hill Collins and Emily Towns and Janet Duarte Bell and Bell Hooks and the late Katie Cannon reached back to the lived experiences of Black women in the 18th and 19th century. These are the stories that I recall that helped give me life during my most trying times, including this time of breast cancer. For if I focus on the cancer, that is what will expand and I will miss out on life. If I focus on going to treatment every 3 weeks and having multiple scans, I miss out on life. So I had to go back and fetch the stories of those that came before me, the resilience, the hope, the love, the peace, the endurance, the tears, the wailing, the release, all of that together that made them who they were. People that were unsung sheroes like Zora Neale Hurston and Phyllis Wheatley and Mary Church Terrell and Ida B. Wells, Mary Margaret Washington, Anna Julia Cooper, Fannie Barrier Williams, Anna Arnold Hedgeman, Paulie Murray, Toni Cade Bambara. Some of these names you may know and others you may not. And some of these names you may know from being an author or of limited scope, but these women were educated during a time when we were told that we weren't good enough to be educated, during a time when we were told that we weren't allowed to read, and Zora Neale Hurston pursued her PhD. Other women started councils, other women planned the March on Washington, but even Martin Luther King's wife, Coretta Scott King, couldn't march next to her husband because they wanted all the men up front. These women stayed resilient in the fight for justice and went to be unnamed sheroes. These are the stories of Black women that I carry with me so that I can move forth. move forth in a way that gives me hope, that gives me peace, that gives me the strength to press forward despite life circumstances, despite racism, despite sexism, despite dehumanization, despite oppression, despite marginalization, because they were, I am, Ubuntu, I am because you are, therefore I am, an African proverb. Our beloved, the Honorable Desmond Tutu talks about a person is a person because of persons. We are all intertwined together. So why not go back and fetch that which gives me life when this life seems to offer nothing but despair? This beautiful symbol that you see on the corner of every slide is Sankofa. It symbolizes learning from the past. In West Africa, the elements of the Ndinkra system are communicators that express philosophies and ideas about our culture's values. Sankofa is an Ndinkra communicator of the Akan culture of West Africa. The communicator is actually a bird flying forward with its head facing the rear, with an egg in its mouth to communicate the importance of going back to fetch and connecting with our African identity, roots, and values. It is a way to reclaim and regain what was lost. The oral traditions that were told that weren't necessarily written. The lived experiences that were not shared because we were separated. Through the enslavement of African people, families were separated, culture was stripped away, bodies were dismembered, tortured, and murdered. The Black diaspora's dehumanization even continues today. We just celebrated Ahmaud Arbery's, unfortunately celebrated the anniversary of his death. I say celebration because he lived a life, and we don't want his life to be lived in vain. He was killed while jogging. Breonna Taylor was killed while sleeping. Philando Castile was killed while driving. The list goes on and on and on. So those heinous things are still happening today. Nevertheless, the resilience, resistance, spirituality, and humanity from enslavement to the present kept us alive as a diasporic group. Going back to fetch it has kept us alive as the Black diaspora, because of the resilience of those that have come before us, because of the griots who continue to tell these stories of resilience and resistance, because of the lived experiences, because of our creative prowess, because of our communal acumen, because of who we be and honoring who we are, despite what the world is trying to tell us. There is a stream of culture, a stream of culture that runs back centuries until today, a stream of culture, of water, of liquid flowing, and continues this current to a specified direction. So we're not talking about just a wayward splash of water. We're not talking about a stream that has no direction. Most streams make a way out of no way. Most streams know the direction that it is going to travel toward the ocean. Most streams have this direction and will break through rocks and break through any obstacles to get to that destination. So these stories of go back and fetch it, this Sankofa moment, encourages us as the Black diaspora for us to move forward and do what it is that universe, that God, that our higher power, that community is calling us to do. Like the trees, the air that we exchange with the trees to live, the sun that rises and sets, the animals on the land, all of that is a part of our community. And when we go back and fetch it, we realize and we honor that dignity works both ways and in all things. So I want to leave you with a couple of things. This epistemological curiosity. Yes, I'm a PhD student and I am in the midst of research and doing my dissertation proposal. So yes, we're gonna throw out some big words here, but it means something very simple. This epistemological curiosity, as we go back and fetch it, means that we are learning and knowing about another without judgment, without preconceived notions, that this curiosity comes out of loving and a desire to learn and a desire to want to be in community, despite what the status quo is telling us, despite what we have been taught. We have this epistemological curiosity, a curiosity of the way one shows up in the world, the way one chooses to be, the way one chooses to live out their experiences. And once we have this curiosity, we begin to ask questions and we begin to lean in and we begin to hear differently. There's a difference between oral and oral, O-R-A-L when we are speaking, and A-U-R-A-L when we are hearing, and how we are hearing and what we are listening to. And when we listen to the stories with an open heart and an open gut, and we follow our gut to know that this person, although different, is a part of my community, is a human being, is someone to be honored and revered, does deserve some dignity and honor, then we are able to come to the table with this epistemological curiosity and begin to address the status quo. We then begin to build relationships. We then begin to build community, whether it is at home or in the workplace. And I know oftentimes in organizations where everything is seems to be so structured, we are now living in a time where there are so many different things happening that this epistemological curiosity can happen even in the workplace. Understanding someone's culture, understanding when someone comes into the building, there's something going on behind the scenes that I may not know. And I'm curious to know what it is. How can I help? How can I be supportive? How can we journey together so we can get this done together as community? So I just want to posit that term, epistemological curiosity. And that means just being curious without judgment and being loving and being open to hear and to really deeply listen. In seminary, I was taught that empathy actually is the ability to taste the salt in someone else's tears, to be able to journey with someone, especially since this life has become very difficult in these generations. And finally, this is a change management model, DVF greater than R. So D is the dissatisfaction with the status quo. And I want us to be very mindful as we talk about storytelling, as we talk about griots, as we talk about going back and fetching it. We got to be careful. Well, no, we don't have to be. We have an opportunity to be careful about how we define the status quo, because the status quo right now in this nation is full of a lot of hate. It's full of a lot of resistance to change. So we have an opportunity, sort of like a crisis. A crisis is a dangerous opportunity. So we have a dangerous opportunity to exhibit a dissatisfaction with the status quo. And once we have this dissatisfaction with the status quo, where we are willing to insert humanity into an inhumane society, when we are willing to become anti-racist, when we are willing to become supporters of those who are lower socioeconomic class, when we are willing and able to love another beyond what I see, when we are able to acknowledge and honor those who look different, those who speak different, those who behave differently. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. So the dissatisfaction with the status quo is an opportunity to bring us together as community and to begin to change the status quo, where the norm becomes love, the norm becomes hope, the norm becomes joy, the norm becomes peace, the norm becomes equity in schools and and in the medical field and in hospitals. I am a Black woman surviving breast cancer. My mere existence is resistance, because Black women, although the numbers are reducing with diagnosis, we are still dying at higher rates than white women because of access or lack of access, because of lack of access to the latest and greatest medicines for a particular cancer, or the mistrust in the medical field. So all of these things are going on, and yet we are called to be in community with one another, to uphold this dissatisfaction of the status quo that tries to separate us, marginalize us, and oppress us. The V is for vision. Vision of positive possibility, and I love this. I love this. I love this. Vision of positive possibility more than the absence of pain in the situation. So I have a vision of possibility more than being diagnosed with cancer. I am not my diagnosis. I am not what society tries to tell me, but I have a vision of positive possibility. I have a vision that says that we can work together to make this land a better place. I have a vision where Langston Hughes says America hasn't become what it should have been. We have all these things in writing where we have an inalienable right to live. We have the right to love, to live, and to the pursuit of happiness. And all of these things can be envisioned and brought to life if we have a vision of positive possibility, a vision that moves us toward liberation, a vision that moves us toward transformation, a vision that moves us toward community. And more than the absence of pain in the present situation. I always say healing ain't easy. Pain, Audre Lorde says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So we're going to deal with some painful moments. We're going to deal with some painful moments, because growing pains, right? But in the midst of those growing pains, in the midst of that, we are able to look back and look at the growing pains that our foreparents had to go through in order for us to do and to be and to exist right now with the freedoms that we have in this country. So we have a vision of positive possibility. Oh, but then you got to take the first step. The first step is the hardest. The first steps in the direction of the vision, creating something that you may have never seen before, seeing a vision that you have never seen before, looking beyond your situation and circumstance and co-creating a new vision, a new life, a new outlook on life. And being able to take that first step. And the beauty is, because of D and V, you don't have to take that first step alone, because the dissatisfaction with the status quo, it's understood that we're doing this in community. The vision of positive possibility, although we may have different cultures and different backgrounds, we're coming together as a community to vision this beautiful country, land of the free and home of the brave, and making sure that we have liberties for all, and we are free, and we are transformed, and we experience this liberation for all. So that first step is done in community as well. And we may not know where the rest of the staircase leads, but what we have an opportunity to do is take that first step. And all of this must be greater than resistance to change. Let's resist the status quo. Let us not be resistant to change. So not only do I thank you for this opportunity, as we recap this Sankofa moment, the stories that Black women tell, I exemplified a story that Black women tell. We can be here for hours if I lifted up all the names of those in the proverbial invisible institution. But the one last thing I want to leave you with is a quote by Audre Lorde. If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. So we must march forward. move together and define who we are as human beings, fighting for righteousness, fighting for justice, fighting for humanity, and most of all, keeping love, peace, and joy at the center of our being as we hear the stories Black women tell, honoring their stream of culture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tawana.
I'm gonna make you the host again, Ateen.
Thank you so very much for sharing your lived experience, sharing the treasures from your storehouse. We've come to the point at SIO where we ask the community to comment and raise questions that they have. So if I've got the power, I will start to unmute the mics. Let's see here. Yes.
Tawana, can
Yes.
you talk to us about your organization and perhaps for the group here an example of some of the work and you know, a difference you saw with using that model? That would be quite helpful. I think it's because it's such an inspiring initiative that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I will do that. And I also want to acknowledge Mama Lovey Cunningham, who's on. When my mother died in 1993, I was just blessed with so many women in my life who kind of filled that role as mama, and she's one of them, and she's here supporting. So I'm grateful. So Soul to Soul Sisters. Soul to Soul Sisters is a Black woman-led racial justice organization. And we center Black lives and Black experiences. And we do that for liberation for all. So we center Black lives, not to decenter white lives. We center Black lives, not to decenter First Nation Indigenous, but we center Black lives because this is our story and this is who we are. And we build a model for others to then insert their voices and their narrative into a narrative that often ignores BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color. So Soul to Soul Sisters not only offers spaces of healing for Black women, but we also have a signature program called Facing Racism. We have a cohort coming up in August. Facing Racism is led by 2 Black women and 2 white women. Our groups, our cohorts range from 50 to 60 people since we've been in this virtual era. And Facing Racism is doing just what I pretty much described, where we are really telling Black women's stories, inviting people into this epistemological curiosity. We are hearing stories and questions from our white beloveds. We name racism, we name racial battle fatigue, we name those things because we have to name it, to face it, to fix it. It's a 7-week program, but a lifelong opportunity. So although it's a 7-week program, we don't check the box to say, okay, you've completed the program and that's it. No, we have a Facing Racism alumni group, and we encourage you to move forward to do things that are adding value to community. And I see here, Katie, I will add the information, Soul to Soul Sisters, in the chat. So you can go onto the website and it's right on the home page and it'll say sign up for Facing Racism in August.
I just, if I may, want to applaud you for your presentation. And firstly, when you mentioned Sankofa, I just almost went through the roof because I have a book titled Sankofa. And, you know, I come from the Akan tribe in Ghana. So, and we use the Adinkra symbols, etc. So I felt like I was home. Thank you very much for that. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, Mensima, that's an honor. That's an honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. And, you know, I know we'll talk after this. So
Yes,
okay, we're
yes,
on board.
yes.
I think the S in SIO is serendipitous.
Right, right. Wonderful. One comment I wanted to make about telling stories about the matriarchs in, in our lives and what they have been through, and the fact that they are not being acknowledged as they should be or as deserving. The differences in this country and that of my native country is that the matriarchs in our culture are honored, that they are the ones people look to in terms of conflict resolution, education, health, as healers, etc. So they drive the communities, right? They run everything within the communities. Even though the men kind of always have the microphone, is the women that really behind the, not behind the scenes, they have the power, but they don't, they're not loud about it, right? It's within their dignity to present themselves as queens, as queen mothers, and really guide the community that way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. It was really wonderful.
Thank you, Mensima. I see that Lanny had her hand up.
Thank you. Just more serendipity, but I want to say first, just what a powerful presentation. You brought me to so many different places, feelings, thoughts through this last half hour. I just can't thank you enough. But the serendipitous piece is, in addition to being a member of this group through the NSN, National Storytelling Network, I'm also a member of the Healing Story Alliance. Last night, they did a program on the Sankofa bird, and I'd not heard of it before. And here it is 2 days in a row, and I am just stunned. But I don't know if you know storyteller Onowumi Jean Mas. She was a dean at Amherst College, but retired recently and is now a storytelling wisdom elder for our community. And she introduced this idea and encouraged us in breakout rooms to look back from all of our backgrounds, all of our cultures, of what we want to bring forward as the wisdom in that egg in order to make the future different, better, stronger for all of us. So I would love to learn more about your Soul to Soul Sisters work and what I call the story exchange conversations that I believe have to happen of each of us owning what is ours and how that informs our lenses now, and how through hearing each other's stories, we can perhaps change the lens that we all carry into the future. So beautiful, powerful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I was eagle eye on that one, but if you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to raise them now or put them in the chat. Tom, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Tawana. This is wonderful to be a part of, and I think really necessary for white men to hear, who are often loud and controlling. But I was wondering, the word, and I don't know that I pronounced it correctly. Is it griot? The griots? Yeah.
Griot, yeah.
Yeah, is there a story, a griot story that's like a parable or proverb or tale that struck you from your ancestors that's been passed down that gives you strength? Are there any stories like that come from the griots that are still alive in your heart today?
That is a very good question and a very timely question, because unfortunately, as far, I can only go as far back as what I presented today. Unfortunately, I don't have the immigration story, right? So, my family was brought here and separated. And so if I had to name something it would be from either my parents or my grandparents, where unfortunately I didn't have that village community outside of Wagner Projects. Although Wagner Projects was a very challenging place to live, it was the first place where I learned community. So your question is a yes, no for me. No, I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have one of those stories that has kind of been passed down as that stream of culture, but redefining, reimagining, and rethinking who the griots are in my life. I'm thinking about how my mother, just gave her life of service and exemplified that service and exemplified unconditional love and did things through her way of being and her way of knowing and her way of living. So those are the stories, the lived stories that I carry with me in the work that I do today. Unfortunately, I wish I did have, my parents died young, my grandparents died young. I wish I did have and still had that griot that was there. So it's pretty much created, like it's not so stagnant or static, if you will. So these griots come into my life and into my world, and then, I embrace them and carry those messages, those eggs, that pieces of wisdom and knowledge with me to move forward and try to do the same for my children. So it's kind of a two-part answer. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks.
I see that Katie put something interesting on the chat, but before we get to that, Tanya, the sister with a middle name, has her hand up.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I apologize for not being on video. I am multitasking and working at the same time, so I do apologize, not trying to be rude. I just want to make a quick comment. We never take the time sometimes we forget to publicly acknowledge our family members. And I just want to take this time within this group to just publicly acknowledge my sister, Tawana. She is an amazing, awesome woman. I strive to be like her every single day. I couldn't have asked for a better sister in my life. And, many people don't know that we are half sisters and have never been brought up as such. We have always been in each other's lives. She was the one that told my mom that my mom was having me. And we are 7 years apart. So I want to take this time and publicly just acknowledge how proud I am of my sister, how far she has come, and how much further she is going to excel and just fly like the eagle that she is, and know that no one can touch you and you got this. So I just want to share my love, and I appreciate it.
Sister, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is so wonderful and so enriching. That's really very powerful. And so let's turn our attention to Katie's question. Her observation was that I noticed that the formula is not additive, it multiplies. Can you talk more about that distinction?
Wow, that's a good point. And I added that into the presentation and then I took it out. So there's just a whole lot of beautiful energy flowing. So when it is multiplied, it's not additive because it becomes, oh gosh, what is the word that I use? It becomes greater. It's so when you add, you can take away, right? And we add in certain increments, but when we multiply, it takes what we have and we multiply it. So it's not just adding on to the dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction is then multiplied with the vision and then multiplied with the first steps. So it's not something we can add and take away, which is why that entire formula has to be greater than the resistance. Does that make sense? And I think a team, we learned that in early in Mitch's class.
Yes, yes,
Been with me.
absolutely.
I think, Tom, talking about stories that kind of come with me. This may not be the griot, me sitting at my grandmother's feet, but one of the poignant things at Antioch was when we talked about this change management formula and being tempered radicals and immunity to change. All of those things was introduced to us at a very early stage in our doctoral endeavors. So yes, so it's multiplied. It's not something that's just added on. They have to be generated in a multiple form.
Thank you very much for that. Jules, I see your hand is up.
I was like having a little kid pick me moment. So I'm curious, like, can you go to something that you can say about where you had like a moment where you that this is the work and this is the direction of Soul Sisters? Like what caused, I always need the backstory. I'm sorry, I won't leave you alone. I'll call you for days if you don't know.
So the beginning and the end, the beginning of Soul to Soul Sisters, we started, Reverend Dr. Dawn Riley Duval and I preached on the Capitol steps in Denver to about 500 Unitarian Universalists. And after the sermon, people came up to us with tears. I mean, tears from their belly about what we preached about justice and racism. And this was back in 2015. Then we said, you know what? For some reason, white people are listening to us. Like we have this, something's happening, this zhuzh, this energy is happening. Because oftentimes anti-racism or anti-Black racism work, or to end anti-Black racism, sometimes is very intellectual, but we move it to the heart and to the gut. So when you come into Soul to Soul Sisters, you're going to feel we are inviting you to feel. We don't want to know what you think, because we're all thinkers, but we want you to feel. So that was the birthing of Soul to Soul Sisters. Then we found that we were doing a lot in white circles, and that some complementary healing needed to happen for the Black women in our community as well. So the end result, as a racial justice organization, it shows up in so many different streams that when we talk about the foundation of fighting to end anti-Black racism, then it opens doors for other opportunities of ending racism against our Latinx community or our First Nation Indigenous or, religion, Muslims or people that are not Christians. And so the end result is an ongoing work to end racism, period, full stop. That's a big, audacious, hairy goal, right? But somebody's got to put it out there, and someone's got to take the first step. After we were dissatisfied, we had a vision, we took the first step, and now, it's ongoing work for both. Is an opportunity for healing for both white people and for people of the Black diaspora. Both need healing from the past, so that we can move forward and create this new vision.
Thank you. And what came to mind during your talk and right now is an artist helps us see something in a new way, even if it's a commonplace everyday item like a coffee cup, how they capture with light and word, painting and things. And I think that's something that I'm getting from you that you're doing in your conversations and how you're using all these modalities in your sessions.
Absolutely. And we do a lot of imagining. We do a lot of envisioning. Like toward the end of the session, we talk about envisioning what does Black liberation look like? Because if we go back to Ubuntu, I am because you are, Black liberation leads to liberation for all. If I'm not liberated, you can't be liberated, because we're in this together. We are inextricably bound. So we offer an opportunity to envision Black liberation for the least of these, so that we all can be liberated from this heinous, oppressive, patriarchal, capitalist, the list goes on and on. We can all be liberated and be free. Big goal, big goal.
the work continues.
Yes.
Well, I would like to thank you, Reverend Tawana, no middle name Davis. You learn something every day. You go to school with someone for 7 years. You got to find out here at SIO. This is the place. I'd like to turn this back over to our fearless leader, the intrepid one, Jules, because I think we have some announcements.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah before we go, but we will have another SIO meeting next month. I know a team who can join us. I'm sorry, a team. Artem. I have my two A-team people. Artem is working on a session. And what we do want to mention is Bill Brantley, who is not here today, is teaming up with the Knowledge Management Association chapter in the Maryland area and Association of Training Development in the Maryland area, which he's now president, and us to do some kind an event, a shared conference event in the spring where I'll be talking actually, and talking about story and all the different aspects of using storytelling. So it's kind of exciting, and we will get that in print and give more information. And over to you, Sarah, to tie it up. Oh, unmute.
That would be smart. Thank you. Thank you. I put my name and email address in the chat, and I just encourage you to send any shout outs you have about your own work or other people's work that you think we want to know about. Mention a couple things that Tom's book and Pete's books have both been up for awards, have gotten some awards. Jules just talked about the collaboration that will be coming up. And we're also looking for ideas for our NSN pre-conference workshop again this year. We'd like to really participate in that. So ideas that you have, please let me know. And Dr. Davis, thank you so much for such a wonderful, inspiring morning. Thank you.
And yes, a team. Thank you for telling me what my core competency is. It's like tracking people down. So thank you very much. It's a joy always to see you. You light up my day. You're an amazing group, and there's so much to do and learn every day. So I love that word serendipity. So thank you, Ani. Yes. Okay. Who's wrapping up? I guess I will. Listen, we'll get we will have a recording. We will figure out how to edit it and upload it. And then if I can't upload it, of course, I'll be talking to our wonderful Danny over at NSN to ask her for that favor. And we will share the links as well. So let me squint here. We have a Danielle, we have a Katie, Lovey, Sarah, Mensima, Tom, of course, Shannon, Barbara, Tanya's iPad, Lani, and of course, Tawana. Thank you for joining us today. And until next time, you are friends. You can show up again and make sure you're in our newsletter and be part of our organization and our group. Okay, cheers. Be safe and be well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tawana. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blessings.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We need to get out.